The morning my father died, my sisters were already dividing his empire. Elena was on the phone with the family lawyer about company shares, while Blair stood by the window, taking pictures of Dad's Manhattan penthouse like she was preparing to sell it. I stood in the corner, still holding his cold hand, wondering when they'd turned into strangers. When the will was read, they got everything. The $31 million company, the cars, the house, even his cufflinks. Me? I got a single black phone, locked behind a password, with a faint blue countdown on its screen. 243 days remaining. They laughed. Guess Dad wanted you to learn responsibility? Blair smirked. A week later, I was sleeping in my car, clutching that useless phone like it was the last piece of him I had. On my 18th birthday, at exactly 6 a.m., it started ringing. And then I heard my father's voice. I still remember the smell of antiseptic in the hospital room, the way it mixed with the faint scent of my father's cologne. He was gone, and yet the air still felt heavy with his presence. I stood there frozen, while my sisters moved like business executives. Elena, we'll need the board's approval before Monday, Blair said, flipping through her phone like it was a meeting agenda. Not our father's death. Elena adjusted her designer blazer. I'll handle it. Dad would have wanted a smooth transition. I wanted to scream. He's not even cold yet. But my voice caught in my throat. At the will reading 3 days later, the lawyer's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. To my daughters Elena and Blair, I leave Hawthorne Logistics, valued at $31 million, along with all associated assets. Then he looked at me. To my youngest Hazel, I leave personal item number 7, Alpha. The room fell silent. A black phone was placed on the table in front of me. Ordinary, unremarkable, except for a glowing blue timer on the screen. 243 days remaining. Blair laughed first. That's it? A phone? Elena smirked. Maybe it's symbolic. Like, grow up and get a job. I didn't respond. I just stared at the phone, the reflection of the countdown flickering in my eyes. That night, when the city lights blurred through my tears, I realized something. Grief wasn't the worst part. It was knowing that the people who shared my blood no longer shared my heart. And as that blue timer pulsed softly in the dark, I whispered to myself, Dad, what did you leave me? 2 weeks after the funeral, I was no longer Hazel Hawthorne, daughter of a millionaire. I was just Hazel sleeping in the back seat of my beat-up Toyota, parked behind an old diner on the Hudson. The same sisters who once posted "Family First" on Instagram had locked me out of the penthouse. When I came to collect my things, Blair stood by the elevator, arms folded. You can take your clothes, she said. Everything else is company property. Dad's letters? Mom's necklace? I asked quietly. She smiled like she'd won. Those too. I drove away with a duffel bag, and that black phone sitting on the dashboard, glowing faintly. 243 days remaining. The number never stopped counting. I tried everything, birthdays, anniversaries, Dad's office code, even my own fingerprint. Nothing worked. At a cyber cafe in Queens, I paid a hacker named Drew $200 to try. After 2 hours, he pushed the phone back toward me. This isn't normal encryption, he said. Military grade. Maybe even custom coded. Whoever locked this didn't want it opened early. That night, as rain tapped on the car roof, I stared at the ticking timer. 238 days remaining. Each second felt like a heartbeat I didn't understand. I started keeping notes in a little spiral journal. Day 10. Tried Mom's birthday, failed. Day 17. Tried Hawthorne 3-1. Failed. Day 20. Tried giving up, but couldn't. Sometimes I hated the phone. Sometimes I whispered to it like it could hear me. Dad, what are you trying to tell me? No answer, just the faint blue glow in the dark, counting down to something I couldn't see. Before everything fell apart, my father used to say, you can't lead from a glass office if you don't know how the floor feels under your feet. He was the kind of man who wore $1,000 suits but spent his afternoons walking the shipping docks, greeting every worker by name. When I was 15, he brought me to the warehouse for the first time. The air smelled of oil and steel, the sound of forklifts echoing like thunder. You'll learn more here than any classroom can teach you, he said, handing me a safety vest. Your sisters understand profit, You'll understand people. He was right. Elena only saw spreadsheets. Blair only saw status. But Dad, he saw me. That summer, I worked alongside the crew. I learned how to pack a crate properly, how to balance shipments, how to read a manifest. The workers called me Little H, and they'd sneak me cold sodas when breaks ran late. One day, Dad sat with me on the loading dock, the sun setting behind the trucks. "You know why I bring you here?" he asked. "To embarrass me?" I teased. He laughed softly. "No, Hazel. Because this is the heart of what I built. The world will always respect power, but it will follow purpose. And you've got purpose in your bones." He fell quiet after that, staring at the horizon like he could already see the end coming. In his last weeks, he started acting strange, locking himself in his study, making hushed phone calls, wiring money to places I didn't recognize. Once, I heard him murmuring my name through the door. The night before his heart attack, he called me in. His eyes looked tired, but there was something fierce behind them. "This is yours," he said, sliding that same black phone across his desk. "Dad, what is this?" "Something that will test you," he replied. "And something that will protect you. When the time comes, it will unlock itself. Promise me you'll hold on." "I promise," I said, even though I didn't understand. Now, sitting alone in my car months later, I could still hear his voice steady, certain, haunting. And every time I looked at that glowing countdown, I couldn't shake the feeling that my father was still watching, waiting, for me to prove that promise meant something. The night before my 18th birthday, the city felt colder than usual. I parked my car near an empty gas station, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled faintly of home. The countdown on the phone read, "1 day remaining." I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every hour, I checked the screen like it might suddenly reveal its secret. At 5:59 a.m., the first light of dawn bled across the windshield. My breath fogged the glass as the phone began to vibrate softly at first, then harder, until the blue glow flooded the car. The countdown vanished. A single contact appeared on the screen, RH Legacy. My heart pounded. I hesitated, staring at the name that once belonged to the man I loved most. Then, with trembling fingers, I pressed call. It rang twice, then his voice filled the car. "Happy birthday, Hazel." For a second, I forgot how to breathe. "Dad?" I whispered, my throat tight. "You've finally reached the age," his voice continued, calm, deliberate, recorded, but alive. "You didn't give up, even when they took everything. You held on when it made no sense to. That's why you're ready now." "Ready for what?" There was a pause, just long enough to make my stomach twist. "For the truth," he said. "And for your inheritance." My fingers gripped the steering wheel as the phone screen shifted, displaying a map with flashing coordinates. A text followed. Building 47, Hawthorne Industrial Park, Sub 3, code 7 Alpha Crown 1961, 72 hours before auto transfer. "Dad?" I whispered to the empty car. "What's down there?" The voice replied one last time, quieter, as if it were a secret meant only for me. "It's what your sisters were never meant to find." The call ended. The screen went black. For a long moment, I sat frozen in the half-light, listening to the sound of my heartbeat echoing through the silence. Then I turned the key in the ignition. If that phone had just brought my father back from the grave, then I was going to find out what he'd left waiting for me. The coordinates led me 40 miles north of Manhattan to a stretch of abandoned industrial warehouses my sisters had tried to sell years ago. According to them, nothing valuable was left there. But as I pulled up to Building 47, the early morning fog clung to the cracked asphalt like a secret. A lone security booth stood by the gate. Inside sat a man in his 50s, coffee steaming beside him. He looked up as I approached and smiled faintly. "Morning, Miss Hawthorne. Your father said you'd come today." I froze. "You knew my father?" He nodded. "Name's Marcus. He told me to keep watch until the right person arrived. Been 3 years." He handed me a security card, edges worn with time. "This opens everything you need. Use the elevator through the loading dock." The inside of the warehouse was nothing like I expected. The dusty floor and rusted forklifts were only a disguise. Behind a steel wall marked "Maintenance Only" was a fingerprint scanner. When I pressed the card to it, a hiss echoed through the air, and the door slid open. An elevator waited, small and metallic, humming with unseen power. I stepped inside and scanned the code. 7 Alpha Crown 1961. The descent felt endless. 30 seconds, then 60. My ears popped as the floor indicator flashed. Sub 3. The doors opened into a vast underground chamber glowing with soft, white light. I gasped. The space stretched wider than a gymnasium. One wall was covered in massive digital maps, supply routes crisscrossing continents, highlighted in blue and red. Another wall hummed with dozens of servers blinking in rhythmic patterns. In the center stood a mahogany desk, polished to a mirror sheen. On it lay 3 items: a leather-bound journal, a silver laptop, and a framed photograph of my father holding me as a baby. My hands shook as I opened the journal. His handwriting sprawled across the first page. "Hazel, if you're reading this, you've found what the world was never meant to see. Hawthorne Logistics, the company your sisters inherited, is real, legitimate, and profitable. But it's only the surface. Beneath it lies the reason I built it in the first place." The next line made my throat tighten. "For 22 years, we've used those same trucks and ships to move something far more valuable than money." Hope. I flipped through the pages, reading lists of shipments, coded manifests labeled medical supplies, restricted zone, education kits, Syria, Relief Route 9. My father had been running a global humanitarian network, disguised as a shipping empire. I turned to the laptop. It lit up instantly, no password required. On the screen appeared a cluster of offshore accounts: Switzerland, Singapore, Cyprus, the total balance, flashing at the bottom, $420 million. A sticky note clung to the corner of the screen, written in my father's hand. "This isn't wealth, Hazel. It's responsibility." I sank into the chair, tears blurring the glowing numbers. My sisters had stolen fortune, but I had inherited something far greater and far heavier. As the fluorescent lights hummed softly above, I whispered into the silence, "Dad, you didn't leave me behind. You were preparing me all along." But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the mystery. This was only the door. The silence in that underground room felt alive, buzzing, electric, expectant. I was still staring at the $420 million figure when the phone in my pocket started to vibrate again. Not the same faint hum as before. This was sharp, deliberate. The screen flashed with an unfamiliar ID, Foundation command. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Miss Hawthorne," said a crisp British voice, calm but commanding. "This is Evelyn Clark, Director of Operations for the Hawthorne Foundation. Your father instructed me to contact you on this day, at precisely 6:30 a.m. I gripped the phone tighter. "My father's dead." "Yes," she said gently, "but his work isn't." My heart pounded in my chest. "What is this place?" Evelyn paused for a moment, then spoke with quiet pride. "Your father built one of the largest underground humanitarian networks in the world. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's saved 2.3 million lives across 27 countries. Every inefficient shipping route, every unexplained expense, those were cover operations. While your sisters chased profit, he chased purpose." I pressed a hand to my mouth. "He never told me." "He couldn't," Evelyn said. "You had to live through loss to understand what it meant to protect something greater than wealth. He believed you were the only one who could continue his work." The phone beeped an incoming message. On the laptop, a document began downloading automatically. The heading read, "Hawthorne Logistics Ownership Transfer Protocols." Line by line, legal documents populated the screen, each one bearing digital seals and signatures. My name appeared beside my father's. Hazel Hawthorne, majority shareholder, 55%, 10%, trust allocation, plus 45%, via subsidiary Shell Holdings. I stared at it, trembling. "This can't be real." "It's very real," Evelyn replied. "The moment you turned 18 and unlocked the phone, all dormant assets activated. You are now the legal head of Hawthorne Logistics and, by extension, the Foundation." Tears stung my eyes. I covered my mouth, shaking. "He trusted me with all of this?" He tested all of you, Evelyn said softly. Your sisters failed the moment they chose greed over grace. You passed because you held on when logic told you to let go. That was the test. I looked around the room, the maps, the servers, the blinking lights, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel lost. I felt chosen. Evelyn, I whispered, what am I supposed to do now? Her voice steadied, resolute. You lead, Miss Hawthorne, just as your father intended. The Foundation has resources, allies, and people waiting for direction. They've been waiting for you. A low chime came from the laptop. Another file appeared, labeled Operation Phoenix. Evelyn's tone softened. That's your first mission. But before you begin, she hesitated, her voice lowering. There's one last thing you should see. Bottom drawer of the desk. I opened it. Inside lay another phone identical to mine, but unlocked. Its contact list was full of names I recognized from headlines, senators, CEOs, global ministers. People who could move the world with a single call. Your father didn't build a company, Hazel, Evelyn said. He built a network of people who still believe the world can be saved quietly. Ugh. I closed my eyes, the weight of his faith pressing on my chest. For the first time since his death, I whispered the words aloud. Dad, I won't fail you. Evelyn's reply was almost a whisper. I know you won't. The world doesn't need another heiress, Miss Hawthorne. It needs you. The line went dead. I sat there in the dim white light, tears streaming down my face, surrounded by the proof of my father's impossible dream. I wasn't poor. I wasn't forgotten. I was the keeper of a legacy hidden in plain sight. And the countdown on that phone? It wasn't an ending. It was the start of everything. By sunrise the next day, I knew what I had to do. For months, I'd been invisible, the poor sister, the family embarrassment, but not anymore. I drove straight to the Hawthorne Logistics headquarters, a towering glass building my father once called a monument to arrogance. When I stepped into the lobby, heads turned. I was wearing my father's charcoal suit jacket, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and cologne. My heart was pounding, but I kept my head high. Elena and Blair were already in the boardroom, surrounded by executives and lawyers. Charts glowed on the big screen, lines climbing upward. They didn't even look up when I entered. Blair sighed. Hazel, this is a private meeting. Security, sit down, I said, placing a thick folder on the table. My voice didn't shake this time. I'm not leaving. Elena leaned back in her chair. You have no authority here. I met her gaze. Actually, I do. I opened the folder. Inside were notarized documents, transfer certificates, and a digital key drive from the Foundation. As of 6 a.m. yesterday, I own 55% of Hawthorne Logistics. You'll find all verification here. Corporate, legal, and digital. I suggest you read before you speak. The room went still. One of the executives, Mr. Caro, the CFO, adjusted his glasses. That's impossible. The ownership trusts were sealed. They were sealed from you, I interrupted. Not from me. Blair snatched the folder, flipping through the pages, her face drained of color. This can't be right. It's very right, I said quietly. Dad made sure of it. Elena slammed her hand on the table. You tricked him. You manipulated the will. Go ahead and call the lawyers, I said. Every document is ironclad. Dad's attorney, Mr. Thorne, confirmed it this morning. Silence. Even the air felt heavy. Then I did something none of them expected. I'm not firing you, I said. You're both brilliant at what you do, just misguided. But things are changing. I took a deep breath. Effective. Immediately. 20% of our net profit will fund humanitarian logistics under the Hawthorne Foundation. And 17 warehouse employees, the same ones you wanted to cut, are being promoted to management roles. Blair's voice cracked. You can't be serious. They don't even have degrees. They have something better, I said, stepping closer. They have loyalty. They have experience. They've been running this company's real operations for years. You just never noticed. The board members whispered among themselves. One man, the operations director, looked at me and nodded slowly. Your father would have liked this. Elena stood, shaking with rage. You'll destroy everything he built. No, I said softly. I'll finish what he started. I turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. You both got what you wanted, the spotlight, the status. I got what I needed, the truth. As I walked out, I heard Blair whisper, voice trembling for the first time in years. What if she's right? The elevator doors closed, and I finally exhaled. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear, from something else entirely. Power. Purpose. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the forgotten sister. I was the one holding the torch my father had lit in secret. And now, the world was finally going to see it burn bright. 3 years passed. The Hawthorne name, once synonymous with luxury and greed, had transformed into something entirely different. News outlets wrote about our company's radical reform, calling it reckless at first, until the world began to see the results. We opened 12 humanitarian corridors across conflict zones, shipping medical supplies disguised as freight. We built water filtration stations in villages no government dared to visit. Over 300,000 children received education kits labeled as industrial materials. And the most remarkable thing? My sisters changed too. Blair came to me first. She showed up in my office, nervous, holding an envelope. I want to fund the Ukraine mission, she said quietly. No cameras, no press. For the first time in years, I saw sincerity in her eyes. Elena followed months later. She didn't apologize, she wasn't the type, but she started managing the foundation's legal operations, protecting our roots from political interference. We weren't sisters who loved each other. Not yet. But we were partners who finally respected each other. The foundation grew beyond anything my father could have imagined. Evelyn became my closest ally, the voice of reason when I doubted myself. And Marcus? He still guarded Building 47 like a watchful ghost, smiling whenever I brought him coffee during my late-night visits. The black phone still sits on my desk. Its countdown is long gone, but sometimes, usually around 6 a.m., it vibrates softly, lighting up with a single message. Coordinates received. Each time I follow, each time, it leads to people in need, a refugee camp, a destroyed hospital, a school waiting for supplies. Each time, I hear my father's words in my mind. This isn't wealth, Hazel. It's responsibility. Last week, a shipment reached a hospital in Gaza. The photo they sent showed a little girl holding one of our packages, smiling, her hands covered in dust. On the box, in black marker, someone had written, Hawthorne Foundation, Hope Delivered. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I whispered, We did it, Dad. I keep his journal in my drawer, worn from my fingers tracing his handwriting. There's one line I never understood until now. Sometimes, you must lose everything to learn what can't be taken away. I lost my home, my wealth, my family. But I found my purpose. The sisters who once mocked me now stand beside me. The company that once measured success in dollars now measures it in lives, saved. And every morning, when the city wakes, I touch that black phone, the one that started it all, and smile. Because it took a locked phone to unlock who I was meant to be. And it took losing everything to inherit something far greater than money, a legacy that saves lives. Dad was right. The real game had only just begun.